Okay, so we finished talking about stakeholder mapping. If you want to check that one out and didn't see that video, go back and find it. So we're talking about how to break down situations, how to break down issues, how to better understand stuff. So as we try and figure out stuff, here's what we want to do. This next video, the one we're on right now, this one right here. I'm serious. Okay, I'm wasting your time. I'm sorry. Um, we're going to talk about root cause analysis and fishbone diagramming really fast. I'll try. Root cause will hopefully go as quickly as I can try. This never works. Okay, so as we try and get to deeper analysis, we could use stakeholder mapping. That's one option. If we're trying to deal with people, remember stakeholder analysis is people. Okay, people. That's stakeholder analysis, not what we're talking about. Root cause analysis is a very, and sometimes it's root causes or root causes mapping. Root causes analysis is probably more accurate. But much like the iceberg, it's a very simple model. It's that often the things we see are simply the symptoms. And we have to look at the symptoms and figure out the roots beneath them so that we can truly solve whatever it is we are trying to solve. So root cause does tend to be a problem solution type, or problem and causes, or cause and effect type mapping. But it does give us a model for working through everyday issues, problems, challenges that we may face. It can be done very quickly in a mental brainstorm or just a quick hand-drawn whatever, or it could be more thoroughly followed, and it essentially it's meant to be a fairly organic process, hence the root. So it could be that as you think of things, you're kind of drawing out the roots of the of the map. So why is it beneficial? It helps us determine in a more organic or kind of a more organic way why a problem, need, or issue exists. It gives us a clearer idea of the systems or system behind what we're looking at, what we see, what we're trying to study. And sometimes it's used as a basic form of fishbone diagramming. So we'll get to the fishbone diagramming. The root understanding of root cause, if you've ever if you've ever had to pull weeds, if you have someone who has pulled weeds, or if you've seen weeds on TV, they usually say that you don't just pull up the top, you have to get down to the root. Sometimes we'll hear this phrase, pull it up by the roots. That's where this comes from. The idea is that when we go to solve a problem, we don't want to just chop off the top and fix the symptom. We want to get at what's causing the symptom in the first place. Okay, so really helpful for medical diagnoses and that sort of thing. That's kind of cool. Really helpful in a variety of situations, business, professional, and personal, all that fun stuff. And again, because it's really relaxed, it's more organic. It feels kind of like it's just a fancy form of a brainstorm, but it allows us to kind of see the connections behind the different causes and helps us drill down into specific causes, kind of work our way into something and zoom in. The quick version of this. I have used a basic form of root cause analysis to kind of just in conversation. There was a few years ago, my wife was struggling drinking enough water. She was getting dehydrated, especially when we moved to Arizona and there were deserts. Apparently, it's dry in the desert. In case you didn't know, low humidity, not good. So she was only drinking like 10 ounces of water a day. I'm surprised she didn't die. I'm glad she didn't, because she's my wife. Anyways, the point is, I had just taught about this root cause and fishbone in class that day, and I pulled out one of the little mappy-doos that I sometimes will provide students with, and we started talking through it. And so I just asked questions, and so essentially the thought process went, okay, I can't. My water bottle stays empty because my daughters interrupt me on my way to fill up my water bottle. I want to take care of their needs, and so I love them, and that causes distraction, and so I don't get to the water filter where the water is. At the time, we had one of those refrigerated filters that you had to fill up at the sink and then put back in, and then you fill it up there. So that was part one. We could talk to our daughters a little bit about that and not interrupting if she was on the way, but that ended up not being the main issue. So we followed. So that was one root cause that we could get at. Another one ended up being when she did get to the refrigerator to fill up her water bottle. This is again a practical example. Hang in there. She got to the refrigerator, fill up her water bottle. The water filter was empty. And so that became, so then we drilled down on that. And so another kind of branch of that route, we realized, well, why is the water filter empty? The water filter is empty because the sink is full. When the sink is full, we can't get water for the water filter because it doesn't fit. And so that makes it difficult to keep water filtered. And we didn't live in a place where we felt comfortable with the tap water. So that's what happens sometimes. So we realized that if the sink being full is the issue, then there are possible solutions. And so what we realized is, one, I need to stop being a jerk and try and take care of some dishes before I leave for work. At the time, I was working a lot. It was 12, 14-hour days. I was teaching like 6 or 7 classes across 2 institutions, and doing research and PhD work and stuff like that. And so it wasn't 7, it was just 6. I don't want to brag. So I needed to take more time and be a equal partner in this issue, and do help with dishes before I left for work instead of after, or when I got home. And then what we also did is, at the time, we trained we realized we could train our 6 and 4-year-olds to rinse their plates off and dishes off. They're now 9 and 7, almost 10 and 8. But we trained our 2 older daughters to do some basic dish rinsing and that sort of thing. And also, and as they grew, we also trained them how to unload the dishwasher and put dishes into the dishwasher. So now, as a team, we were able to attack this problem, and my wife is now drinking 3-4 bottles of water a day, and those are like 20, 30-ounce bottles. So awesome. So no more, less nosebleeds. And just generally more energy and that kind of stuff. And she's been getting really healthy. It's good stuff. So that is a very practical, everyday example of a very organic problem-solving form of root causes analysis. You drill down and you just keep asking questions, and there's not a particular structure to it. But you can do this in the business realm if you're trying to figure out drive-through times at your work, if you're trying to figure out the best way to get somewhere, or the reason why you keep getting stuck in traffic, or the reason why you keep being late to work or to school or whatever. You can use root cause analysis across the board for a variety of things. It's really simple, just a series of asking deeper questions. All right. Of course, that was the short version. Sorry. Let's move on. Fishbone diagramming is pretty cool, though. Now, in its basic form, you see just causes and effects, and this model I have on the screen right now is actually closer to Fishbone, is actually closer to just root cause analysis. But some people use it. The Fishbone diagram may include people, but it's more often associated with the what and why something happens, the objects and procedures that play into a system, situation, or problem. And there's a specific form, like specific categories you're supposed to use when doing Fishbone diagramming. And so let's look at those. One, I guess I should say, root cause analysis is a generic form. Fishbone diagramming, or it's also known as the Ishikawa method, born and raised in Japan, if I remember correctly. It is a lot more popular in manufacturing and industry and at the business or corporate level. In those sorts of contexts, you'll see a lot more Fishbone diagramming. It should be noted it's originally developed as a more collaborative brainstorm process. So you'd bring a bunch of people from different departments into a room and say, hey, we got this thing, let's talk it through. And then we work through these 6 components of kind of brainstorming. So this is a bit more, it's much more directed, much more specific, but it works a lot like the root cause does. So that's why I say sometimes that root cause is the easy version of this. Depending on which thing you're in, you may use one of these 6 categories. Some people will come up with their own categories as well. You're welcome to do that. But if someone asks you to do a Fishbone diagram and doesn't give you that option, assume they want you to use one of these 2 categories you see there. So machines, methods, materials, measurement, people, environment, policy, and then you can switch policies and procedures. So whether it's trying to figure out why things aren't printing well well on a multifunction machine? Is it the machine? Is it the toner? Is it the paper? Is it people who don't know how to use it? Is it the environment? Water is dripping on the machine, that sort of thing. Whatever the case is, you can use this this version to dig in and drill in deeper. And so I think that might be those might be the only examples I have visible right now. I'm hesitant to bounce out of this. I really like this sample though. So if my entire screen goes weird for a minute during the middle of this video as I do this, I'm sorry, but I think it's worth it. So following this link, oh good, it showed up on the other screen, which means I can drag it over. Let's try it. So if we want to better understand fishbone diagramming, there's a really cool example. Bye, see you. Now you can't see my face as I'm talking to you. So I'm just going to show you this source because I think it's cool. So on morestream.com, it has a bunch of the history, how to get started with it. It uses something that's fairly practical, so you can walk through this example. Okay, so I'm not going to actually walk through the whole example. I'm just going to bounce through the thing. So say you're a person. Maybe you're in 6th grade. Maybe you're 60. Maybe you're 26 and trying to stay cool in the NBA. And you're struggling with missed free throws. You know, personally, I average about 1.5 out of 20. And I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm better than that. I think I'm better than that. It's been a while. I mostly just played street ball when I was younger. Make it sound cooler than it is. So if someone says, hey, how do we map out the systems involved in why we're missing our free throws? So this seems pretty straightforward. Okay, we've got people. The people involved in the missed free throw are primarily just the shooter as far as form goes, things you can affect. But if you tie that to what we learned about in stakeholder analysis, you might also consider as part of maybe blending people with environment. You may also think about the other players on the box, or you may consider you know, people in your head, coaches, or things that might distract you mentally, or even if you're in the middle of a game, you know, the spectators in the stands who could be heckling you and booing you and or cheering you. Those may be people to consider. But here they just show the shooter. They say the material is the ball. That's the thing being used or processed. The method is how we accomplish what we're trying to do. And the environment could be if it's outdoor court, indoor court, the weather, the lighting, levels of humidity, wind, you know, depending on where your court is located, you go to shoot, you got a 20-mile-an-hour wind, suddenly the ball's out of bounds. Much like my face out of the screen in that moment. Or you've got your machine, the thing that is doing processing. Most people could come up with these fairly easily. Here's where the fun happens in this particular example. So the idea would be that you brainstorm with group or team members based on their prior experiences. They would have different input here. And so, kablam, they come up with all this crazy stuff. And you're like, I never thought missing a free throw could be so complicated. In the words of Avril Lavigne, why you gotta go and make things so complicated? That reminds me, in another video I did yesterday, I quoted 9 Inch Nails. The band was actually Tool, if you know what I'm talking about, and the movie was Enchanted. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch that video. It has nothing to do with right now. Avril Lavigne, back to, here we go. So, when we look at these details for fishbone diagramming, the whole point of any analytical model is to remind us that things are more complicated than we originally think they are. So when we look at a model like this, we go, oh yeah, I get that, okay, there are pieces. But the whole point of analysis is to drill down deeper than we can do on our own. And so on our own, just in our heads. And to try and put it into some sort of visual representation when we're talking about these mapping and analyses, techniques for analyses. We can use these as ways to encode information, and when we talk about the scientific aspect of writing, we'll talk about memory versus writing. We write these things down and we put them into mapped out systems like this using these techniques because it makes it easier for us to see and represent the problem in this way. When we do that, we can better pinpoint and start to work through systematically how to solve a problem or how to better understand something. And that is extremely important. That's what analysis is all about, is helping us have systematic processes for better understanding roles, relationships, all that fun stuff of the pieces that we're looking at. And so when we look at something like this and go, wow, I never thought that could be so complex. That's the point of analysis. That's the point of recording something in a mapped form like this to help us better put the pieces together. Okay, with that, alternatively, say mapping this way is hard for you, or you don't like it, or all you have is a Word document and you don't know how to use smart art to do word hierarchy charts or anything like that. You could always do a hierarchical outline like so. And that's another way that you could possibly do represent this type of analysis. Each of these are different genres that could represent the analytical data. Okay, so with that, that's all I'm going to say about the Ishikawa method or fishbone diagramming. And so this can, again, these are really popular. Fishbone diagramming is a very popular form of analysis in manufacturing and industry, in the corporate world, in the business world, especially when it comes to collaborative brainstorming and problem solving. So hopefully this has been helpful. It was probably longer than I meant for it to be. Enjoy. On to the next video, where we get rid of that fishbone diagramming and start talking about even cooler stuff like process mapping and algorithms and heuristics and stuff. So that'll be cool. All right, talk to you later.